So this next paragraph, there's a footnote at the back of the book which Bach added later, and he added it to the end of a sentence. So what I'll do is I'll read the paragraph, and then when I get to the point where the footnote would be inserted, I'll read the footnote, and then I'll continue with the paragraph to the end. Man hebt bei dessen Übung die Finger nicht zu hoch und einen wie den anderen auf. Man macht ihn anfangs ganz langsam und hernach immer etwas hurtiger, aber allezeit gleich. Die Nerven müssen hier ebenfalls schlapp sein, sonst kommt ein meckernder, ungleicher Triller heraus. Mancher will ihn dadurch erzwingen. Bei der Übung muss man in der Geschwindigkeit nicht eher weiterschreiten, als bis der Schlag völlig gleich ist. Diese Vorschrift merke man bei der Übung schwerer und dabei geschwinder Passagen ebenfalls, damit sie mit der gehörigen Leichtigkeit und Deutlichkeit vorgetragen werden. Durch diese vernünftige Übung erhält man gar leicht dasjenige ganz gewiss, was sich niemals durch eine übertriebene Anstrengung der Nerven erzwingen lässt. Der höchste Ton bei den Trillern, wenn zum letzten Mal vorkommt, wird geschnellt. Das ist, dass man nach diesem Anschlage die Spitze des auf das geschwindeste ganz krumm eingebogenen Fingers auf das hurtigste von der Taste zurückzieht und abgleiten lässt. So, Bach is telling us how to practice trills. And again, there's things I have to say about this paragraph. And I want to say right at the start that this is an incredibly intimate paragraph, and I'll explain, or I'll justify that as I talk. But I just want to talk about, again, what's relevant with this chapter is what I said about, those in the cage, those in Lilliput getting it exactly 180 degrees wrong, and saying that very often you'll have a better chance of coming across the right answer if you do the exact opposite of what they tell you to do. And here's a case of that. And I'm sure many of you in your education, piano education, will have heard or will have been told in terms of passage work in the footnote, in the addition, Bach says about how this method, a way of practicing is good for difficult and fast passages. And so many of you, most of you probably, will have been told, as I was told, to lift the fingers, to work the fingers when practicing such passages, technically difficult passage, when trying to get the finger strength. You'll be told to lift each finger and really work it when you're practicing super slow and super accurate and all those things. And when you're practicing those bits with the metronome, they'll tell you to lift the finger as high as possible and really bring it down using strength. And they will say about keeping the wrist loose while you do it and not to get tense up. But they'll tell you to lift the finger. And it is exactly the opposite of what Bach is recommending you do. Bach is saying, don't lift the finger too high. They're telling, lift the finger, lift it as high as possible. Really work that finger, those fingers. So he says, don't lift the fingers too high, and one like the other. And then you start off completely slowly, and then you always get gradually faster, but always, but the the trill should always be even, and that the nerves must be slack, or like you shouldn't have any tension. The wrist should be loose, whatever you want to call it. Otherwise, if that's the case, what will happen is an uneven bleating trill will come out. And Bach says then some want to try and force it this way. So what does Bach mean by that? He could mean that they'll be trying to play the trill fast immediately, and it'll be uneven and bleating, and what they'll do is they just think if they do it long enough that they'll break through to the other side, and when they do, the trill will be perfect, it'll be even, it'll be beautiful. And I would offer an addition to that. I would say that nowadays people try to force it with the metronome, and that those same people who in Bach's day who want to force it, that those same people nowadays would be using the metronome to force it. And how do you use it? How do you force it using the metronome? Well, what happens is you'll be practicing it at a slow speed with the metronome. And the idea is you move it up a notch, so it ticks faster all the time. And you're playing your trills faster and faster. And the metronome is meant to solve questions of evenness, tension, all these things. And what it's meant to do as well, the forcing it comes in, the metronome forces you to play faster than you'd normally be able to play. So if you get used to playing along with the metronome, when you move that metronome up to a fast speed, it'll force you to play faster. So I would say that nowadays the people try to force the trill with the metronome. And I would say as well, if you think in terms of a detective film, there's a criminal and they're trying to get away with a perfect crime, and there's something that gives them away that they don't notice, but the detective spots, and then they know they're the criminal. And I would say that prescribing the metronome as a teacher gives you away. And when a teacher or a professor prescribes the metronome, it shows that they have it betrays the fact that they have no confidence in the advice they gave you. They'll tell you all sorts of fancy ideas about finger position and all, and all these kind of fanciful concepts, like imagine you're holding a ball, or imagine a drop of water is dropping from your fingertip, or there's all these neat ideas. And so they'll tell you the finger position, they tell you all sorts of things about playing the piano, and then they prescribe the metronome, and it betrays their lack of faith in what it is they've told you, because what they're saying to you is you can't do it without the metronome. They don't believe you will be ever going to be able to play fast enough without the metronome. They don't believe you'll ever be able to play even enough without the metronome. They don't believe your rhythm will be good enough without the metronome. They don't believe that you're going to play without tension without the metronome, because the metronome, for them, they rely on the metronome to solve all those problems. So, in that way, it betrays, it shows they have zero faith in what it is they're recommending. Whereas I, with my finger position that I'm sharing, with all those discoveries, what I will tell you is the metronome is the death of all those things. That if you want to make sure you never discover the riches or the benefits that are to be gained from what I'm sharing, use the metronome, because the metronome is a surefire way to stay in the cage. And I would want you to throw the metronome out, but you wouldn't need to, because if you actually discover the benefits of what I'm sharing, you will never feel the need to touch a metronome again for the rest of your life. So the metronome is the worst thing you could use. I am telling you, the metronome is the worst thing you could use when you are trying for yourself the discoveries I've shared. And as well, you will find that when you are practicing with the discoveries I've shared, you'll be doing it exactly like Bach recommends. You will not feel, well, like I was talking about strength, you will not feel the need to work the fingers at all. You'll even forget that you ever did, because you will never feel like you do not have enough strength. And another thing is with that, Bach says in the footnote that this is as well the way to practice more difficult and faster passages. And he guarantees to you, he says, ganz gewiss. He's certain, he is sure that you, in this way, you will achieve what you would never achieve by overexerting the nerves, by trying to force it. And I would add to that, by trying to force it using the metronome. Because what happens as well when you use the metronome, when you are trying to force yourself to play fast, when you get to that point, what happens is you're racing to meet each beat. There's no evenness in your playing. And the other thing is, Bach trusts you to be able to hear yourself when it's even or not. He doesn't say you need to listen to something ticking in order to, he trusts you that you will hear when it's even. And he puts evenness above all else. He trusts you, and he is promising you, he is guaranteeing you that his way, which is 180 degrees the opposite of what people in the cage, what Lilliput will be telling you to do about lifting the finger, working it. He is telling you the exact opposite, and he is guaranteeing you this will work. And so the question could be, who do I believe? Do I believe Bach, or do I believe my professors? And let's say you're wondering and you go to your teacher with that, and you say to them, and your teacher has said to you, work the fingers, lift them up to get the necessary strength for the fast passages. And you say to your teacher, well, in paragraph 8 in the chapter for Trills, Bach says not to lift the fingers up too high. But you're saying to lift them up. Who should I believe? And what the most likely answer you will get from your teacher will be that they'll say, you see, the action on the keyboards in Bach's time was extremely light compared to the action on modern grand pianos. So they didn't have, strength of the fingers wasn't an issue back there. But finger strength has become an issue nowadays because of the heavier action on a grand piano. So when Bach gave that advice, he had no idea about grand pianos, and so he wasn't giving that advice. It wasn't about being strong. It was just about moving the fingers. So, and you'll go, oh right, okay, oh is that right? You'll kind of already have known that. I mean, and so, and that's it, and then that'll be their explanation as to why they're saying something different to Bach, and why you should not listen to Bach, but listen to them. Because Bach, basically, again, this is another instance between the lines, Bach is an idiot. Don't listen to the Bach because he doesn't know enough. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know modern grand pianos. So I tell you to lift the fingers high because I want your fingers to be, because you need finger strength. Because that's an issue now with modern grand pianos, and it was not an issue back then. And were it an issue back then, I guarantee you that Bach would be telling you to lift the fingers, to work the fingers. And so that would be it. You'd be convinced to ignore what Bach says and follow Lilliput. Because mediocrity attacks genius. It wants to eradicate genius. But if you want to think, if you want to take Bach seriously, and if you want to consider Bach as being one of the greatest classical musicians that ever lived, and maybe one of the greatest keyboard players that ever lived, you are, like I said at the start, this is an extremely intimate paragraph. You are hearing his advice on how to practice difficult passages. And as well, I would say with the ganz langsam, completely slowly and always faster, there is no set time in which that process should take place. That could happen, that you go through it once slower, a passage once slower, and then the next time it's already at full speed. And it would all depend on how much music is in the passage, how much of how much music there is to note and make sure you are including. That'll determine how often you have to play it slowly. But if there's not much music to note, it could be that you begin ganz slowly and before you're even at the end, you're already playing it up full speed. And from then on, you'll only ever play it at full speed. That the third movement of the F major Mozart Sonata K332, I think it is, that I uploaded. There's passage work there in the second section. There's the opening page, and then the next page is passage work, and there's a lot of music, a lot of things to note in that passage work. And so that I will have practiced that passage just like Bach is describing there, a bit more than I'd be practicing other passages, because there's so much music in there to note. It will have taken me longer, but I'll have done it exactly how Bach, exactly the same as Bach is saying how to do it. And the results were good. And I never would have achieved the result I achieved in that performance with the metronome, forcing it. It never would have happened. I didn't force anything with that. There was not 1 second where I forced any of it. So, and this last sentence that he says about the upper note of the trill, that when the last time it occurs, that it should be hurried or quickened, and that you're pulling that finger that's playing that tone for the last time, that's the fastest finger, and it's completely curved, bent in, that's pulled at its quickest from the key, and it's let slide off. I've said before that you are going to discover the secrets that can be found in this book. And here is one of those secrets. And what is the secret that Bach is sharing here? And I would say it's like the secret for 2 things. And what you have here with this last sentence is, because this paragraph is intimate, this last sentence is magnified. How did Bach write this paragraph? How did he write this last sentence? He wrote it by sitting down at the piano or at his keyboard instrument and playing trills and closely observing what is happening with his own fingers when he does that. And he is sharing with us the results of his observation. So that's how intimate this paragraph is. We are gaining the results of Bach's close-up scrutiny of his own very own fingers, his very own hand, when he performs trills. And that is a perspective that you have to be, in order to have that same perspective of Bach playing trills, you have to be either in Bach's body, looking through Bach's eyes at his fingers, or, sitting on his lap while he plays the trills, looking at his fingers. And if you're sitting on his lap while he's at the piano playing trills, that's pretty intimate. I mean, that's more intimate than I'd want to be. But that's how intimate this chapter is. And that's how magnified that last sentence is. And you might say, well, how do you know that? You're just assuming. You couldn't possibly know that. And I would say, in answer to that, let's say, Bach wrote this. This is what Bach has to say about learning trills, about practicing trills. And here in this last sentence, he's sharing a secret. So something special about trills. And he knows he's going to die. And he knows that what he writes here, this will be part of his legacy, along with his compositions. That this will last longer than him. And in 100 years' time, in 2023, people will be looking at this, listening to this, what Bach has to say. This is for all eternity, what Bach has to say there. And imagine it's you who's writing about trills. In the space of a paragraph, you are to write all the information you think is important about playing trills, about practicing trills. And that's going to go on the record for all eternity. And when you think of Bach and the standard he is sort of expected to maintain, or the name brings, the expectation that comes with the name Bach. And let's say you experience the same expectation when you write a paragraph about trills that is going to last long after you're dead. Are you not going to sit down before you do that and try out trills and observe yourself playing them just to make sure you actually do say the essential? Or are you just going to sit down at a table and write on a page off the top of your head whatever comes to mind regarding trills? No, you won't. You are going to sit down at the piano and you are going to look at yourself and you are going to study yourself up close, and you're going to be trying to capture those details that normally would go unnoticed. And so, what Bach is sharing here in this last chapter, the last sentence, this is magnified. And if you imagine, let's say there's a teacher who wants to be teacher's pet and accepts everything at face value and just wants to be, like a good student and do everything exactly as the teacher says, but not understanding why the teacher's saying it or what the goal is with that, or understanding what it is. And let's say you're doing yourself, or you're getting your students to follow the words of what Bach is saying, and trying to get them to rip away the finger as fast as possible from that tone and slide it off the key. You know, when you don't understand that this is magnified, that this is up close, and that is not the normal scale. When you make that the normal scale, what you're going to have is an exaggerated gesture. And it's like clowns, you know, their comedy comes from doing things in an exaggerated way, like blowing their nose. It'll be over the top. So what that teacher will have their students doing is clownish gestures. And because they won't know why they're doing it, they won't know what the end goal is. So what the end goal becomes is how obvious it is that you're doing what Bach says to do. So you're going to have people, you know, make like clownish gestures. But this will be rather imperceptible to the, you know, if you're sitting in the room with Bach, you won't even notice that, because Bach will have seen that studying, looking closely at his fingers and at what's happening. Somebody listening, watching him play, won't even notice it happening. And there would be a question, not really, for all those, you know, who want to push the metronome or who recommend the metronome for playing trills, getting trills up to speed. The question would be, when you think of that, what Bach says about the last time that upper tone appears, it should be quickened. The question to those people would be, how does the metronome cater for that? And I say you could ask your teacher that. How does the metronome cater for that? Bach says that the last upper tone should be hastened, quickened. How does the metronome cater for that? But I don't really recommend you to do it, because, you know, if you keep going to your teacher with questions that with the answer they always have to give is, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. They're not going to appreciate you for that. So you won't be doing yourself any favors when you do that. And so here, the only answer to that is the metronome can't cater for that. It can't cater for something that Bach is saying belongs to the trill. And what does that say? How does that make you feel when you hear that? That the metronome cannot cater for the trills. If this, what Bach says, is important at the end, and I'm going to tell you what the secret is Bach is sharing here, because Bach doesn't spoon feed. People can encounter this paragraph and move on and feel like they heard nothing they didn't already know, or feel that they've heard nothing that's relevant because, you know, not lifting the fingers too high, that's at the time when strength wasn't important. They won't connect that forcing the trill is also, with the metronome you're also forcing the trill. They won't get any of that out of this. They won't understand that what we are seeing is an up-close, the most intimate view of Bach actually playing trills on the piano, studying it and telling us the results of his careful observation, up-close observation that isn't even possible for somebody sitting next to him watching him play. They're not going to spot this. And then to find out that the metronome can't even cater for what it is. As soon as you hasten that last tone, upper tone, you're out of sync with the metronome. The metronome is oblivious to what you do. It's not going to do one beat a little extra, or it's not going to cater for that. It'll just keep ticking, oblivious to what you're doing. So you will not be able to achieve that with the metronome. That cancels out your chances of ever achieving what Bach is talking about with the metronome. And I would say that what Bach says there about the completely curved finger, that is completely in a line with the finger position that I've shared. And I would as well make an assertion that when Bach was studying that and came up with those results, that he was rather looking at trills, like he was rather looking at himself playing trills on white keys than on black keys. I'm saying that. And that this completely curved, bent in finger, that is exactly the finger position that I have shared. That is exactly how your finger will be when you are playing a trill on white keys. And I will, in paragraph 12, there will be evidence that I can present to back up my assertion there on that. In the next video, I'll share that secret, or I'll reveal the secrets that Bach is sharing here. And I'll go on to talk about, I'll go on to paragraph 9, and there'll be more things there to counter Lilliput and those in the cage, and what they say, and how what they'll say to dismiss that what Bach is saying, what they say to discourage you from choosing Bach over them, or choosing me over them. So stay tuned for the next video, for the secret, to hear the secret that Bach has just shared. Thanks. Bye.